Heaven's Gate cult. Is that the one where they all top themselves?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. And they were getting picked up by aliens.
Yeah, so it was in the 90s, wasn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. I remember watching it at the time. I remember watching that when it came on at the time. There was a kind of a build up to it. And
Right.
it was, will they, won't they, will they, won't they? And they were just complete cooks. A lot of people thought that it was a kind of a put on because of the way they go on. I mean, it was all like, yeah, man, you'll have to come with us, man, and all this. You know, I mean, I haven't seen it for a while.
And they're all found wearing the same brand new spanking white trainers. And I think it's the one that is it the one where they drank the Kool-Aid, or is
I
that?
think it's something like that, yeah. And they were all like, they all filmed each other. They all filmed saying goodbye, and they were all excited. Tonight's going to be the night, and
it was something to do with that comet. Do you remember the Hale-Bopp comet?
Yeah.
That's coming across.
They're completely and utterly off their nuts. But there was a lot of, there was, what do you call the one 1971, 72 in America?
It's Jim Jones.
That's the one. There was over 1,000, including 200 or 300 children.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, they killed the children first by giving them arsenic, which is apparently a very, very painful way to die. And then themselves, but yeah, they came on like over 1,000 bodies all.
It's amazing how so many people can become indoctrinated into something that's so obscure. It's kind of like I guess I watched a documentary about Scientology's creator or founder, L. Ron Hubbard, the other day or yesterday. He's a funny chap as well. He's a science fiction writer who created a religion, and now it's such a successful religion, a rich, successful religion.
I've been kind of looking into that as well. There are apparently over 4,200 religions in the world at any one time. Well, there is currently, now. And if you were to start going into some of them, it's beyond ridiculous. Like Scientology is beyond ridiculous.
Yeah.
But you have what appears to be, well, you would think they're smart enough. John Travolta, I mean, he can fly a bloody jumbo jet. So, I mean, he has to have, like, a few brain cells working.
Yeah.
He believes in it. Tom Cruise, I totally get, because he's so far up his own arse, it's unbelievable. Walks around with an entourage and nobody can speak to him unless they've pre-agreed questions. And, I don't know where he thinks he is or what he thinks he is. But, I mean, it just goes to show you. Do you remember, there was a program that used to be on early morning TV, the King and Queen, or the King of Queens.
Yeah, Leah Remini. Yeah.
Yes. She was in that, and she was in Scientology. She got wrapped up in the whole thing, but then she came out of it and it was like, oh, for God's sakes.
She's one of the main people now who are against it.
Yes. Because she says they're becoming ridiculous and they're becoming this secret cult that's dictating how people live, etc. And
yeah, there's a lot of crazy stories that they're coming out with, and there's a lot of documentaries exposing the behavior.
That's what happens, I think, when people get into cult situations. People want to be led. Not all people. There are lots of independent thinkers, thank God. But there are people that want to be led. They want that direction. They want that hassle taken out of their hands. They're not sure about this. They're not sure about that. So if somebody tells them, look at, and they appear to know what they're talking about, I'm telling you, this is the honest to God truth. Oh, well, okay then. Usually money, background, and, some sort of peer pressure is involved as well. But most, I'd say 40% of the people want to be led.
Yeah, that's another thing. Those churches in America where the pastors are flying in like jumbo jets and stuff.
I know. Not hear about the one in, I actually don't, maybe Wisconsin or something like that, and he built an ark.
Yeah, I heard of it.
Something like 6 million on building an ark.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be really God's will. Some guys, some spoiled bastards, fucking folly. The things with the ley lines, the more I think about that one, that's one now that really appeals to me, because that's one that I think makes sense. Like having nature's own video camera that is recording everything all the time. and maybe in certain weak spots or in certain places where there's lots of electromagnet activity, that these places are where you get wee glimpses of that. So it might not necessarily be spirit world. It could be something that eventually will become, obvious to us, but it's just not at the moment. There's different aspects of what's paranormal, what's supernatural, what's actually ghosties, what's something that's to do with nature, and we just don't understand it yet. Yeah.
Everything that we know about would have been magic back in the past.
Absolutely. Sitting doing this, we would have been branded God knows witches and warlocks forever, even electricity, when you think about it. People that have got fed up with religion and they've embraced a darker side because of, of their anti-feelings to religion.
Or there's something to be said for the darker side of religion hiding under religion. So in the Vatican, when you were in the Vatican, you obviously got the tour and you saw all the historical stuff, but I'm sure there's some not dodgy, but like some dark stuff going on there too.
Of course there is. They have copies of some of the oldest manuscripts in the world, and some of the oldest manuscripts in the world are pre-Old Testament. Now, they'll only acknowledge certain ones. They'll only acknowledge any of the ones that have to do with either the apostles or Jesus or, but you have like your sort of Old Testament guys like Enoch. Theirs weren't as, they cut and dried and things like that. So, I mean, theirs was a different take on things, and they have those manuscripts. They have manuscripts apparently going back nearly 10,000 years.
Wow.
I don't know how true that is. I know that they only acknowledge ones going back 5,000 years.
Which is old enough.
Which is old enough, exactly. But we'll never see the half of it. Like, they have manuscripts that are thousands of years old that refer to demons and devils and, So it's very much, I think still with the Catholic Church, I think they've opened up an awful lot by the fact that there's more exorcists, by the fact that priests are being more open. I think this Pope Francis is brilliant for the church. He's sort of making things come out more in the open, so that there isn't all these wee dark corners, etc. Having said that, I still think 40% of what they have in those Vatican libraries will never see the light of day, because they just couldn't afford for people. I don't know, maybe they think we wouldn't be ready. Maybe we aren't ready. I mean, they say that every pope has certain information that's passed down. There was libraries. I mean, when you think about it, Alexandria had a famous library. Now, that's more than 5,000 years ago.
Yeah.
And it had a famous library. Now, we only know of printed, but all those books would have been written by hand, of course, because they didn't start printing until, 1470 something. And the Bible was the first thing to be printed. I remember reading that, the monk that did it. Yeah, it's the German one, what do you call it?
Luther.
No, it's not. No, it's not. The first printed Bible was a monk, and it's a really famous version of the Bible. It was the first printed on a machine. He literally invented this machine, printing machine. And I've read. This is really annoying. I've read the book. I've only read it a couple of years ago because I was absolutely fascinated by it. Because a lot of people didn't think. First of all, he wanted a copy that was translated from Latin. A lot of priests and bishops not into that. It wasn't for the lay person. It was for the person that studied theology years, that was allowed to have that information. So, I mean, things like like the Bible being printed was a big deal. Before that, that was classified information.
So I wonder, like, Latin seems to be pretty tied up with Catholicism still.
Well, it was because it was the language that these books would have been written in originally. It would have been Latin, Old Greek, but Old Greek would have been more the myths and legends. So Latin was very much the language of Rome. So that's the language that these books would have been written in. It would have been what scholars were learning. That would have been their universal language. If you were a religious scholar and you went to Rome to study, then you went to study Latin.
We're from different places.
Yeah, exactly. But I still think the church are hiding a lot from us.
Was it the Gutenberg Bible?
The Gutenberg Bible, that's it. The Gutenberg. He was a monk, and he was quite, he was really a go-getter, quite modern for his day. and about opening up religion and stop making it this sort of big secret society where people, had it lorded over them and they were afraid of, people were afraid of the church. People were afraid of the church until this century, so he would have been a go-getter in that sense. But yeah, Gutenberg Bible was the first printed Bible.
Here's one for you. Have you ever heard of the Devil's Bible? This is the Codex Gigas or Gigas.
No, but I have heard of the Grand Grimoires that are supposed to have been written on the original Grand Grimoire that's in the London library. You can actually go and view it if you make an appointment. I did try to get a copy in Belfast, various libraries, but the only way you can go is to go to London to see this book. And this Grand Grimoire is supposed to have been written with blood onto human skin. So the vellum is actually human skin, and the red ink is actually blood. But you can only view this in the London History Museum. It's the Grand Grimoire, so I'm assuming that's the exact same thing, the Devil's Bible.
This is similar, but it has an interesting story to it. So it's a giant book. It's a really big book, and the legend has it was during the Middle Ages. A monk broke his monastic vows and was sentenced to be walled up alive. In order to avoid his harsh penalty, he promised to create in one night a book to glorify the monastery forever, including all human knowledge. Near midnight, he became sure that he could not complete his task alone, so he made a special prayer, not addressed to God, but to the fallen angel Lucifer, asking him to help him finish the book in exchange for his soul. The devil completed the manuscript, and the monk added the devil's picture out of gratitude for his aid. Blah, blah, blah. That's the legend. This book does exist.
Well, you see, that's the whole thing. Why a lot of people are attracted to the darker occult and Satanism is because that when you do cast spells, when you do these incantations, when you do all these, and that's what they are, they're tricks to get that attention, things will happen. Things do happen. And people do it because I think 80% of the time they want to believe it, but they don't believe it. So they kind of do it and it's like, oh my God, and then something happens and it's like, oh my God. Or if you're sick and twisted enough, it's like, wow, I just know that when you're drawn to the darker side, I think initially I had a not an unhealthy interest in it when I was younger. I just had an interest. I had an interest in everything. And I figured I should know. I don't remember half of what I've read now, but I remember thinking forewarned is forearmed. So I mean, if you're in a situation where you need to know how to protect yourself and why and what you're dealing with, then because there's just so much out there that we don't know. And as I said earlier when we started the conversation, I think some of it can be scientifically explained, but not to say that it can explain everything, because you've got to accept, whether you're religious or not, that there's an awful lot to do. There's an awful lot of dark evil out there, and we know there's a lot of very rich, powerful people that believe in it as well, and they're the type of people that like to see results. I'd say of the highest percentage of very rich people that would be into this kind of thing are the type that like to see results, as opposed to, my reward will be in heaven.
Deals with the devil.
Yes, exactly. I think, sort of when you're more sort of humble, poor, you appreciate more what you have. It's just sort of this, like once you have everything, what do you do? And it's like, the idle hands of the devil's playground. They look for something that's an alternative. They look for something that's, and, I mean, we know all through history that powerful men love that sort of us and them attitude.
Yeah.
So that's from the Masons to Templars, from the Templars to the Illuminati. There's a certain credence to being part of that if you're wealthy. You're not part of those circles if you're an average Joe. You're just not. Do you know? So you already have that, you have that privilege to begin with. So when they meet somebody else that's part of it, they already know that person's, a peer, as it were.
Did you ever see the Stanley Kubrick film Eyes Wide Shut?
No, I didn't. I remember seeing a little. See, I'm not a big fan of Tom Cruise.
No, it's a slow burner for sure. I first saw it years and years ago when I was a kid, and now I have no interest in Tom Cruise or Nicole Kidman either. Um, but there's some interesting things about it that got me re-interested in it. So it was Kubrick's last film apparently, and apparently the studio really hated it.
Mm.
And apparently it's got very realistic depictions of what the secret societies are actually like.
Really? Well, you see, funny that wouldn't surprise me in the slightest because
And
I
it
think
was
Hollywood's starting to be exposed in a big level now.
It is, yeah.
You
There's
know,
things. Well, the Jeffrey Epstein thing, and also the Corys, two Corys, Corey Feldman. You know,
it goes back further than that.
I'm
Errol
sure.
Flynn.
Yeah,
Errol Flynn. There was a house that he stayed in that they had. There was parties in that was supposed to have been some young lady of the night or whatever was killed in. But they used to have these debauched orgies.
yeah,
And apparently it was claimed by certain people at the time. Now, I couldn't tell you what books I was reading at the time. This is going back a long time. And that they claimed that he was a devil worshipper, and they used to have these occult things with these mad orgies. Now, so that's gone back to Hollywood in the 20s.
yeah, sure.
You know,
That,
this didn't just start with Epstein and them. This didn't start overnight. That's been established for, I'd say, the best part of a century.
I think as well, we're probably not confusing, but on there's two things going on. There's probably the whole kind of modern trafficking and sort of just
Yeah.
general prostitution stuff, but then there's the kind of more secret society devil worship stuff, which is probably kind of more old school for sure.
But you can't, I mean, there's definitely, it's like that thing, 6 degrees of separation.
Yeah, that's an
There's
interesting one.
always a connection. There's
Yeah.
always a connection somewhere going back to it. Definitely. I think I mean, it's a subject we could never get tired talking about because, I mean, just from our point of views, we're both well read. You know, we both paid attention to things. I've always paid attention to if I'm sitting watching a film, I'm watching, I can't watch it, but if I think there's been no effort put into the research, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter that it's fiction. It doesn't matter that it's that. But
Mm,
I always think at least put a bit of effort into the research so that the story grips you. That's what and that's what I loved about the Dan Brown ones because he scared people because his attention to detail in his research was phenomenal. So people just whenever he brought out this story, a lot of people just believed it right away. So a lot of, oh, that's not true. Well, of course it's not true. It was made up. But his research was all true. His research, that's why it was so easy for a lot of people to believe it. That's why certain people had it banned. It was too close to the truth. It was a made up story. But all the politics and the background of the hierarchy of who was really in charge behind closed doors and things like that was too close to the truth.